We're going to start the meeting. Mr. Secretary, you will do the poll roll.
Yes, call the roll. Chairman Carney,
He's here.
Member Fernandez Ketchum.
Here.
Member Freed? Here. Member Sue?
Member Shaw. Member Zaridi.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. I think we have one action item today. That's the first one. The approval of the minutes of the February 7th meeting. The board members have all had an opportunity to review those minutes. Are there any recommended changes? None? Thank you. Hearing none, may I have a motion please to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second. Thanks. Thanks very much. All in favor? I'm sorry.
You can do a voice vote.
May we do that? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
None.
Any abstained?
Thank you.
It's passed.
So the minutes are approved. We have a presentation, an important presentation scheduled for today. I gather it's going to be a tripartite presentation, and I'll look forward to hearing. Thank you, Rich, for being here to get us started.
Thank you, Chairman Carney, and good morning to you, members of the Water Board. Thanks for being here. So yes, as the chair pointed out, today we start the rate-making process, which you all know very well. We've done it on a number of occasions. We do have a presentation to walk through a couple of the highlights, as has been our tradition, of what DEP has accomplished, particularly over the last 2 months, to make sure you're aware of the major things we've been working on, particularly several of the major capital projects that are a large chunk of our current and upcoming investment. Then we will be proposing, as you've seen in the deck that you received a couple of days ago, the rate for fiscal year 25. And then I will turn it over to Joe and to Omar to talk further about the details of our budget, the rate setting analysis, as well as the affordability efforts that we have incorporated into this proposal. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Look, I'll start out. We're still doing our main job and doing it really, really well. Our drinking water quality report that comes out every year continued to demonstrate that New York City's water is the champagne of drinking water. One thing that I actually realized we did not include in the pages that follow, there's been a lot of press over the last couple of weeks about PFAS, PFOA, and some of these forever chemicals. There was actually a very good article, I forget in which journal, explaining, and I was quoted in it, that while there is one place in the watershed of the Kensico, actually, sorry, 2 sites in and around the Kensico Reservoir where there has been PFAS detected, the west of Hudson watershed, we have not had an EPA-approved test identifying PFAS at all. And thanks to you all approving a consulting contract 6 months ago or so, we are now beginning work on a survey of all of the potential PFAS risks in and around the Kensico Reservoir. So I'm very pleased that we are well ahead of the game on this topic, and New Yorkers have nothing to fear, certainly in the near term, from that. Next slide, please. I'm really proud of the work that our Bureau of Water and Sewer Operations has done this year. Tassos Georgelis, who's on the right, who's a right hard hat, our deputy commissioner, is a phenomenal leader. And one of the things he has been doing consistently, and this predates my tenure, so this is more on him and not to my credit, although I support fully on it, is bringing metrics and data-driven decision-making to bear. And so through an aggressive approach that got featured on New York One to do soundings of our water mains, using technology that's literally listening in, we have been able to reduce water main breaks. So knock on wood, if the next couple of weeks go on track, We are on track to have the fewest number of water main breaks in the recorded history of the agency in fiscal year 2021.
Some of us saw the New York one piece, Commissioner, it was well done.
Yeah, no, really proud about this,
Yeah.
really proud about this. And this is further what we will be implementing, much like we have a data-driven approach to catch basin inspections that Tassos developed and implemented a year and a half ago. We are working on an AI-enabled, risk-based approach to identify water mains that need to be replaced. I'll have more to say on that in upcoming meetings. It's really exciting the level of accuracy that we are able to get when we use this tool to predict which mains are most likely to break. And the fascinating thing is, and I've asked my team never to use the terrible phrase aging infrastructure, because as we have found, water mains from the 1950s and 60s are twice as likely to fail as water mains from the 1800s. Yeah, has to do with the kind of steel. They over-engineered stuff in the 19th century. And so it is not about how old it is. So anyway, more on that.
I'll take your advice, yeah.
Next. We did a milestone or reached a milestone a couple of weeks ago, no, a couple of months ago now at this point. In our Blue Belt strategy, really big project on Staten Island, $110 million project at New Creek on Staten Island. Perhaps, in fact, our marquee Blue Belt in the network right now. This is just a big achievement. This is huge and will protect a big chunk of the mid-island from flooding. And neighbors and the local residents are in love with this project. So it's a big achievement for us. And for DBC, of course, because we do all of this work through the City Department of Design and Construction. Next. I previewed last week at a hearing of the City Council some of the early findings of work that we as an agency have been doing for the last 2 years now. Nearly 2 years ago anyway, on the first anniversary of Hurricane Ida, Mayor Adams announced that we would start work on a comprehensive stormwater resilience strategy for the city to deal with these storms that we are now having. 2023 was a crazy wet year, as I think we all know. You know that we design the sewers generally for a target of a 5-year storm, which is supposed to come every 5 years. Somewhere in New York City, there were 5 storms in 2023 that were 5-year storms. Not in the same place, so they're not now 2-month storms, but nonetheless, the frequency with which we are getting that kind of rain is significant. This is going to be a 4 or 5 year project. So there is no way we do not have a plan yet. So what we are working on is to come out with an update to the public, because of course New Yorkers rightfully will not wait 4 or 5 years with no news. They want to hear what we are doing. It's been really it's been a ton of work. We've had to upgrade our models. We now have a working model of the sewer system, which we never had before, which is a really big deal. That allows us really to identify the most efficient locations where we can intervene, because if you have flooding in one place, the efficient place to address it might not be there. It might be upstream or downstream of that point in the sewer network. We can now do that. For the first time ever, we have integrated planning going on between green and gray infrastructure. So rather than saying we want to build green infrastructure here or gray infrastructure here, what we're saying is we have a flooding problem. What's the most efficient way to address it? And in some cases, what's the fastest way to address it? Because different approaches may have very different implementation timetables. We've done a couple of case studies that we've dived deep into that have illuminated a couple of things that we didn't fully know, because that's what case studies help us do. The bad news is that the total cost of even a basic level of stormwater resilience for what we expect to be the 5-year storm going forward, which is only the 5-year storm, right? So not a 10-year, not a 100-year storm, is probably something like $30 billion. That's a very ballpark estimate, but that is where we are likely to be. Next. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. We did have a slide up. Any thoughts? There we go. I just didn't recognize it as I flipped ahead. So yeah, so thanks to the work that, or the funding that you all authorized back in October, as I said, we are well ahead of what we need to do on PFAS. Happy to answer questions on that. So yeah, it's really only 2 locations that are known, and that there's work being done on around the Kensico around the Kensico Reservoir, and nothing that we've really identified in West Plains, but we are certainly good. Next slide. All of that was good news. As you may have read in the newspaper this morning, and certainly read in this document over the last few days when we received it. One big piece of news is that in the executive budget that the mayor released a week and a half ago now, the Office of Management and Budget indicated the intention not only to ask for the rental payment that was previewed in the January plan, which was the 50% for fiscal year 24 and 100% for fiscal year 25, but the intention to include or the inclusion of the full rental payment in FY26 and beyond. And so this is a return to the past. This is, as you all know, the rental payment is fully in the right of the city to request. DEP has no role in whether it is requested or not. It is governed by the lease between the water board and the city. And while it had been in abeyance for much of the last several years, it has now been requested. And so we have incorporated that into our budget and into the forecasts that you will see. Next.
On the
Generally, Chair, it would be at the end of the fiscal year because they would have
end of
the end of each fiscal year, because what the authority and the board have to do is true up the books of the respective entities and then figure out what the debt service was and calculate what the debt service was.
So we've already been told that it's coming. Do we get another notice that it's due?
Yes, we would get that on our end, and it'll probably vary slightly from what these numbers are. Sure. It's based on what will the actual be versus projections, but it's in that range of
Right.
300 million-ish or so.
I will say back to good news. We've had some very exciting appointments around the agency over the last several months. We have a new chief operating officer, as you all know, Vinny Sapienza, officially retired last week. 41 plus years of service to the public and to DEP, and a tremendously distinguished career. And we miss him greatly. I used to say that I wake up every morning as commissioner and thank God for the water board and for Vinny. We'll miss him, but at the same time, I'm really excited that we have recruited Catherine Mallon, who came back to DEP as our chief operating officer in January. She had been deputy commissioner for engineering, design, and construction until 2014. Got a really strong track record across the industry, but with real depth in capital project delivery, and has worked in both Britain and in California over the last decade as well. So she's going to be fantastic. Joe hired a new deputy commissioner of budget, Patricia Lyons, who comes from the Department of Corrections most recently. We hired, oh, there she is. Sorry.
Where she is. Oh, there she is. How are you? Good to have you. Thank you for being here.
As you know, we have stood up the Bureau of Coastal Resilience. So I think it's already been mentioned to you all that we hired Lori Farrell about 6 months ago as our deputy commissioner for coastal resilience, which I'm really excited about. She's got a really great background in resilience, both on the planning side and on the engineering side. She's a civil engineer, so she brings both experiences to that. And of course, as I've often said, coastal resilience becomes very real very quickly because the first swing gates at Eastside Coastal Resilience are expected to be turned over from the contractor to the city this summer. And therefore, BCR goes from just being a planning and imagination team to actually having vital public equipment that we need to operate and maintain. So this is going to be very real, very fast. And then it is outside the scope of the water board. It is the tax levy side of DEP, but we do have a new deputy commissioner of our Bureau of Environmental Compliance, Lubin, who comes most recently from the Department of Sanitation, the Oakland City Council, and a number of other agencies. And this is the bureau that handles air noise and hazmat. And in a smaller organization, I have made that bureau now report directly to me, so that it's not overshadowed by the water utility that, of course, takes up 90+%. We had made, as you know, a lot of progress in 2023 in addressing vacancies due to some of the constraints driven by the city's budget over the last 6 months. We're still doing a little bit better, but our progress has tailed off. I think there's a general sense around the city that with the executive budget being out, that we will now really be able to get focus on addressing our vacancy rate. And that is something return to prioritize. Next.
Is there any particular area where the vacancy rate affects the progress we
I'm pleased to say I don't think there is now.
Okay.
Right? In 2022, I could very much see, frankly, we were deferring maintenance at wastewater treatment plants due to the lack of sewage treatment plants. We were not doing as much as we could do. You could see it in our catch basin cleaning gap, right? It was hurting in 2022 because of the vacancies. Happily, all of those metrics are now back up. So among the things we're going to be doing is looking at our vacancies to make sure that they are allocated in ways that are optimal in terms of reducing overtime, in terms of achieving the initiatives in our strategic plan, and enriching the basic operations. But I can't think of anything right now where lights are flashing. As you know, one of the things that we very much prioritized last year was delivering on our capital plan. Thanks to the work of Joe, Marissa, and a number of people around the agency, we did a really good job in fiscal year 23, where we delivered more than 100% of our capital plan. We are on track. I'm not going to claim necessarily that we'll get again to 103, but I am optimistic that we will do very well with our FY24 capital commitment. And of course, our FY24 is significantly higher. So we are on track to reach, we think, nearly $3 billion, or maybe just about $3 billion in investment this year. As you know, we have a $29 billion capital program. So we have to be able to average $3 billion a year, or else the math doesn't work. And so that is part of what we have been doing, is really bulking up our ability to deliver contracts. And I will just say one thing that this administration has prioritized, which is really important and yet unfulfilled in Albany, is the proposal to make the Department of Design and Construction an authority, DEC plus proposal. This is really important. I'm actually teaming up with Transportation Commissioner to push to help DDC on that legislation. But getting DDC the ability to do things like progressive design build is critical if we are ever to be able to deliver, particularly the $9 billion that's currently in our capital plan for sewers, because effectively 100% of that has to be delivered by DDC. Sewers are, by definition, underneath the streets, and therefore they are what DDC does. And if DDC is not equipped to use state-of-the-art processes to deliver that capital work, it will not happen. So I hope our legislators will prioritize that, even though that's not moved in the last 2 sessions. Next. A couple of things just to run through on the capital program. We are moving quickly on the Tensko Eastview connection. This is the backup connection, so it's not just a backup. The only single point of failure right now in the entire water supply system is the connection between Kensico Reservoir and the Catskill, Delaware ultraviolet treatment plant. This is the long intended, it's been planned for about 10 years. We are on schedule. This is not a delay. There is no risk to that, but we do always want to have two connections everywhere in the system. And so this is a tunnel that we expect to start construction work on sometime over the next couple of months. This is a $1 billion plus project. Really quick. Next. We are once again intending to do the connection of the Delaware Aqueduct, the bypass tunnel, the Rondo West Branch tube. As you all know, we've had to postpone this now twice, always for the right reasons, because our top priorities are ensuring that during the 6 months when the aqueduct is out of service, that there is no interruption to water supply for New Yorkers, and that the workers on the construction site are absolutely as safe as possible. The delay, the postponement in 2022 was due to concerns that the Croton treatment plant would not be at full capacity due to some things related to the filtration material. That was changed. Now we are highly confident that that plant will be at full throughput. And then last year, we had some concerns about water infiltration into the tunnel during the period of construction that, if it were more than expected, could put our construction workers at risk. So we made the decision to postpone it by a year. We did a very big test where we depressurized the tunnel. We are now reasonably confident. I can't tell you 100% because we're always going to be making decisions right to the last moment. But right now, we are fully intending to move forward with this project in October, and we believe that all of the safety issues and all of the other issues affecting the local communities have been addressed. Next. We continue to work at pace on water tunnel number 3. We are, I believe, we are on track to complete this and have it in service in 2032. The current piece of construction work, which is digging these final 2 shafts in Long Island City, is proceeding. I was there maybe 2 months ago. And it is, I have to say, a lot deeper than when I was there a couple months before that. That piece of work will finish in 2027, and then there's several years of putting in the equipment, the valves, etc., that brings the water up from the deep tunnel into the surface level distribution system. But that will be in operation in 2032. Next. We also, as you know, we are in a long-term, more than a 15-year agreement with the Department of Justice and EPA to make changes at Hillview Reservoir. One of the key pieces of work is that we have to undertake now, but we will start work on this year, are some improvements to the facilities at Hillview Reservoir where we add chlorine at the final treatment stage of the city's drinking water supply. And so that is also a several $100 million project that will kick off over the next couple of months. And then finally, on our review of capital, we continue to do, I think, really good work at the Gowanus Canal, which all told is nearly a $2 billion set of investments in holding tanks as our contribution to addressing the Superfund site that is the Gowanus Canal. I was at the site a couple of weeks ago, and we are working really hard not only to keep construction on schedule, it's a very aggressive schedule that the EPA has required, but also to ensure that we are doing everything possible to minimize the negative impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. One of the challenges in this neighborhood is we have the 2 largest and most visible construction sites, but the reality is this entire neighborhood is under construction. And so there are a lot of concerns by the community about disruption, noise, odor, things like that. We believe we are doing a very good job of addressing those, but it is it's a community that's undergoing a lot more. All right, so That's what we've been up to. And then with this one slide, I will then turn it over to Joe. So our proposal to you is that we raise the water rate by 8.5% from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25. We believe this is necessary for a couple of reasons, and Joe will walk through the breakdown of what's driving this in a slide or two. Given the challenges of inflation, which are economy-wide, which frankly a year or two ago we were not yet seeing the impact of inflation on our capital program. Now we definitely are. There's kind of a lagging impact on us. There are changes in the cost of capital, of course, that you're all well aware of, and of course the need to fund the rental payment. All of that contributes to what we think is necessary in an 8.5% rate hike. I will point out, water utilities across the country are doing significant rate hikes. We are not out of line at this number when you look at our peers, particularly in the older cities of the Northeast and Midwest. Even though there's no way around the fact that this is the largest rate hike we have requested in quite a long time. We believe it is necessary because, of course, above all else, we have to maintain our bond ratings. It would be counterproductive to save money by keeping the rate low, but then wind up paying more by seeing our bond ratings decline. We still know our coverage ratios, and of course, we need to fully fund not only our operations, but also our capital plan, a lot of which is actually mandated. And so that is our request to you, to, after the process that's prescribed by law, of course, that we would ask you to approve 8.5%. And with that, I turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Rick.
Not
on the-
questions for Mitch or Joe?
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. No, and if you have anything, of course, interrupt me. But, for the next slide, please, hold on. I'm going to first turn it over to Acting Deputy Commissioner Albert Kramer, because he's going to talk about our accounts receivable and collection efforts. So I think that'll help, color some of what we're talking about, being 10%, proposed increase. So please, Albert.
Thank you so much, Joe. So again, my name is Albert Kramer. I'm the Acting Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Customer Services. Adam is actually my first boss in city government, so coming full circle here. But yeah, so this slide is all about revenue protection and customer service, and I really want to emphasize the customer service component because it's a good reminder that most of our customers do the right thing, they pay their bill on time, and we are making changes to help our customers. We upgraded our customer portal. We're making changes to help answer their questions with first call resolution and other changes. It also is good customer service to ensure that the small minority of our customers that don't pay their fair share and aren't doing the right thing, that we're taking the appropriate collection measures against them. We, as many of you guys know, the amnesty program last year was a huge success. This is not coming out of nowhere. We've given customers every opportunity to do the right thing, and many did. We collected over $100 million and provided $22 million in interest relief. For those that did not participate, did not enter into a payment agreement, we have really stepped up our enforcement efforts in multiple ways. The first is I had the pleasure of standing with the mayor back in March. You may have seen the news media attention when he was in front of a hotel, a fancy hotel in Chelsea, that decided they didn't need to pay their bills. So he announced a water shutoff program, and it has been very effective. But we have not needed to, and we do not want to shut off any of our customers. We want customers to do the right thing. And we've put shut-off notices on office buildings in Midtown. 2 hours later, they cut us a check for nearly $250,000. We've got customers who, one person hadn't paid us for 10 years, sent us a check for $85,000 almost the next day. So I'm not saying that every customer is in that situation, but there are a lot of these customers who are using us for cash management. They don't believe that we're going to enforce against them, and we're making it clear that that has changed. This is the most aggressive enforcement posture that DEP has taken in a long time. I'm new to the game. I've only been here 13 years, but we're really stepping up because it's only the right thing that's fair to our ratepayers. And so We have noticed over 800 customers for service terminations, mostly 1 to 3 family homes. We've collected over $3.5 million. We've secured another $6 million in payment agreements. We're also looking into other new tools that we haven't used as much. There's a collections law firm. They're started today. They're sending demand letters to nearly 90 condominiums and other types of properties that owe us over $11 million, saying if you do not pay us, we will take you to court and sue. We actually sent letters to the condominium residents ourselves saying, you might not be aware that your condo board is mismanaging. Please pay your bill. We've done multiple types of those warning letters, and that is actually brought in by our calculations over $10 million because we do not want to have to use these enforcement tools. We would much rather that customers come in and do the right thing. Go ahead.
Remind me,
Yes.
Of how we treat hardship situations.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Chair. So especially as it comes to service terminations, there are multiple protections in New York State law when young children are involved, disabilities, seniors. We make sure, the sort of the guiding mantra that Rit has said all along, we want to be compassionate to those who deserve that compassion and make sure that we're enforcing on those that are trying to game the system. And there are situations where there are customers who have, come into a payment agreement last year when we were doing service terminations and then never made any type of payment. Well, they went right to the top of our list this year because we're not going to let people try to get through. There are customers who, they own multi-million-dollar homes and they might be 62. All right, well, we're not going to shut them off. But perhaps, and most likely, we're going to look at referring them to a legal collection law firm because we cannot just let those tens of thousands of dollars of unpaid charges go unaddressed, especially when we're having conversations like this about rate increases for hardworking New Yorkers. We're going to be following up, and this has made a difference since this site was posted. Our chronically delinquent customers are down 5%. But we do have a small minority of customers that are larger multifamily residential and commercial. They're not paying their fair share, and that is continuing to lead our delinquent balance up. And one of the main reasons why is we do not have our most important enforcement tool, and that is the lien sale. We've been without the lien sale for years, and Joe is going to talk about where our negotiations are with the council and why this is such an important tool for us.
Thank you, Albert.
Quick
And I
question.
think
Yes, sorry. So if I'm just reading this right, the number of accounts that have delinquencies is about, is it 100,000? Is that what-
So
that's the orange line is the number of accounts?
yeah, it's roughly, up here, it's roughly 93,000,
Gotcha. And how many total accounts are there?
835,000.
Gotcha. I mean, it doesn't feel like that small a percentage. It's a pretty substantial.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you, Albert, for segueing into that on the lien sale, because before you go off this slide, to that point, as you see by the slide there, you can see the yellow box on the years that we haven't had lien sale in effect, and how the balance of the accounts receivable has grown from what was, under $800 million to over $1 billion. I mean, that's partly due to the rate increases. It's also partly the fact that as these individuals account holders continue not to pay, we have higher interest rates now. So it's accruing interest at a greater rate. So those that can afford and aren't paying are just digging a deeper hole for themselves. And that's where we're being cognizant of that, but also trying to also make sure that those that are having affordability problems, we're able to work with them. And that's to the point of having payment agreements. So it's like you don't get in a situation where you're not able to be able to make the management of really, which is a basic service, with just as electric or gas, you need to have water and sewer service there. So if we could go to
Before moving on, and just
Sure.
one clarifying question. Have we actually shut anyone's water off?
Yes, we've shut off 7 properties this year.
Can you just maybe describe a little more about what?
Oh, absolutely. So, and I just want to be clear, this is after a very long notification process. We send letters to the property and all available addresses, overnight mail. We actually have our crews show up, and one of the members here was talking about how, we've spray painted in front of the building, we warned, and that's shown in the numbers. If we've noticed in over almost 800 customers, we've only shut off 7. It's a statement to the fact that most customers engage with us and do the right thing. If they're not, they're essentially extremely recalcitrant, or they just don't believe that we're going to go forward. And that's what we're trying to make clear. The mayor is trying to make clear that we will do this if we have to, but we do not want to.
I really want
Case by case basis. Is it difficult to shut off somebody's light?
I'm not sure if I would use the word difficult, but it is time intensive. You know, you do have to, we don't have shut-off valves that make it easier like other municipalities do. We do have to have a crew dig up the street. And again, to Rick's point about how our Bureau of Water and Sewer Operation crews, they could be going out, making sure that we're, you know, keeping our catch basins clean. There's so much work we have to do, but we're focusing on this as a small percentage of that because it's so important, because revenue collections, the rates, that is what funds this entire operation. Without that, there is no DEP, there is no, you know, some of the best water in the world.
So, can I just follow up on that? The characterization of those 7 properties, are they like vacant properties? Is it a single family home? Is it an office? Is it a hotel?
Absolutely. So the properties are either 1 or 2 family. Most of them are either under construction or vacant that have been shut off, and one has been occupied. And you know what happened? As soon as we shut them off, they came in, they paid for the first time in over 10 years. We brought them into a payment agreement. As Joe said, we understand that they can't pay off the entire balance right at once, so we're able to be reasonable, work with them going forward. And we don't want to shut anybody off. We want them all to come in, work with us on a payment agreement, and help them if they're eligible for hardship or affordability programs that we have. We want to make sure that they're benefiting from it.
And I just want to recognize, I know this is the absolute last thing you guys want to do. You are taking a very compassionate, thoughtful approach to this real problem, $1 billion. If customers don't pay it, it gets passed on to every other ratepayer. So this is a issue of equity and fairness within the system. I just applaud you guys for taking it seriously, for tracking it, for keeping us informed, for doing it in a responsible, reasonable way. To deal in $1 billion hole is huge for us, especially as we enter rate setting years. And I know rental payments and other things will get a fair share of discussion. I'm sure we have our opinions as well, but this should as well. And I just really applaud you guys. This is a hard thing to do, and really appreciate the way you're approaching it.
Very nice. Can I jump in with 2? First of all, thank you for saying that. 2 things I will observe. One is that the phenomenon of what you're seeing here, where the number of delinquent accounts is going down, but the total is going up, is a reminder that the really recalcitrant and the really difficult delinquent customers are not single-family homes, right? There is a sense that the lien sale is all about putting poor homeowners out of their homes, and that is not at all the reality. It is much more straightforward for us to shut off water at a single-family home than at a multi-family apartment building, right? Given the protections that Albert pointed out. So really, the bulk of the people who are hiding behind the lack of lien sale are large landlords. It is not single-family homeowners who are at risk by lien sale. The other thing that I'll point out is that what we've also found, and Albert hasn't even fully talked about the full breadth of everything that BCS is doing, because we're also going after the wide variety of larger delinquent customers. Some of them are government agencies, some of them are nonprofits, things like that. And among the things we are finding is that there are complexities, right? And one of the things I've asked Albert to do is not be afraid to find out that the meter wasn't working, or there was actually a dispute on the other side. Instead of actually filing a dispute with us, was just kind of quiet quitting and not paying their bill as their protest, right? I'd much rather work out and get an accurate number, even if it means that we actually have to write off some AR because it was inaccurate for some reason. I'd much rather get this to reality than to keep a fiction of something that we leave sleeping dogs lie and don't follow.
I think the part I alluded to it, where my question was going, is I remember in a prior meeting sharing a list of the major delinquencies. A lot of them were big government agencies like the MTA, the Port Authority. How has the thinking evolved on how to approach that? Because it wasn't totally clear how much of the percentage of the billion that is, but they were some big accounts that's a big overdue bill.
Yes. Yes, we've gotten very aggressive with a lot of those. The reality is when you've got somebody who owes us 10 or 15 or 20 million dollars, and we do have a couple of those, there's always a story there, right? And it is not like those big government agencies are having cash management issues, so there's usually a story. I would be happy at some future meeting to go through like where things stand with the specifics. This is all, it's all foilable, it's all public. But in some cases, we do have some hardships. So among our larger debtors are HDFCs, low-income housing complexes, and so we are trying to work with them very thoughtfully. And as you know, a couple of months ago, we asked them to extend our authority to do some of the things that would help groups like that. We do have some where there are issues with our metering or issues with a long-standing agreement for how we would bill an organization, and usually the other side decided they didn't like the agreement, but they didn't tell us, so they just stopped paying the bill. But again, by going after them, we surface these issues, and in a couple of places we have a joint plan for how we're going to get to a shared agreement on what the bill should be.
If there's the ability in a future meeting to have that characterization broken down, commercial, residential, multifamily, single family, government agencies, be curious to see how that's evolved over time. If it's easy to do, yeah.
We'll work towards that. Thank you.
Well, everyone sort of smokes my points on the next slide. But to what Rich just said as well, which I was going to emphasize, and what we'll emphasize, is that, one of our biggest tools, which you haven't had since, fiscal year 19, is the lien sales. The administration has been in discussions with the council, city council finance staff, because this is also not just about lien sales for water and sewer charges, but it's also about real property liens as well. And they have a much bigger portfolio of outstanding debt that they have on that front as well. So we usually work hand in hand with the Department of Finance in terms of, making it, establishing protocol for how lien sales going to be going forward. As everyone can understand, and what Greg alluded to, a lot of, council members look at this and they hear from their constituents that, it's going to fall on us as the single family property, which is, there is that cadre of minutes. To Albert's point too, as we're going through with shutoffs, we go through that same process for lien sales, especially for your single family homes. We make sure that we're being very deliberate and thoughtful before we actually go and actually even consider bringing a lien for sale. And most people, when we do start the lien sale up, and they're quick lien sell up, we'll first, cull out those risk elements, people that may have either, a hardship application or other circumstances that may be, preventing them from being current on the bills, and so we'll work through that with them. Then once we do get to that, we'll usually work through payment agreements with them as well. But I think the biggest point being is that this is a lot of our larger real estate owners and large multifamily properties, which are not subject to a lot of the, shut-off measures that we've been talking about. We're not going to shut down water on a 10, apartment building, but lien sale could be an effective tool to bring that, that landlord, the rental property owner to the table and be able to go and start being able to come out, work through paying the bill or working through a payment plan. And we will also be working with the council in terms of what types of, measures they might want to look at in terms of offering up, sort of exemptions for, hardship programs, affordability programs, many of which we'll talk about later, the ones that we've been using for a number of years here. So that really is, I think, a big piece of what, to what you just alluded to, Adam, too, that $1 billion, we could get lien sale, that would really have a very fantastic effect in terms of being able to help reduce, not just probably for next year, we get in for fiscal year 20, we're not going to really see an impact for fiscal year 25 unless we get it in for, the spring of next year, but starting to make an impact in fiscal year 26 and after. But Dan, I think you have a question.
Just a quick question. So I know that in the absence of lien sales, you still have the ability to file liens and potentially get collect during transactions.
Yes,
Still happening? Are we still filing the liens?
We're starting to look into that. I will say it gets a little complicated, and I may turn to Al Rodriguez as an attorney here, and works for the, the law department. It also does, get to the authority of, it's not DEP or the water boards that has the ability to exercise those liens. It really is on Department of Finance. It has to be able to bring the properties into in-grant. But we could start that and say we're going to take it all the way up to getting them to, in-grant, which would be foreclosure. But it's a very, it's a big pipe.
But even before foreclosure, if they want to sell the property, they would have to satisfy the lien.
Yes, and we've been looking at that, so I don't know, Albert, if you want to.
Yeah, there's a title read
Yes.
done that validates that there's charges and, and as Joe was saying earlier, when the interest is compounding, it almost becomes like a little bit of like a reverse mortgage kind of situation, which is unfortunate. You don't want this where the bill will come due and then people discover, oh, when they want to sell the home, they actually have to settle these charges to get that done. We would much rather these customers come in, work with us, get these balances under control before it reaches that type of situation.
But, I'll just jump in. One of the issues that we've encountered, and that we have not taken this off the table. But the way I understand it now, please correct me if you understand it differently. The way I understand it is that we have a lien, right? We do not have to file a lien because of our governmental status. Right? And one of the challenges is proactively filing that lien. Every time there's a water bill or an accrual of charges, we would have to refile that. And so there's an administrative burden charge. Now, the flip side is, as Albert pointed out, we are doing shutoffs on properties that are vacant. Maybe they've already changed hands, maybe they're under construction. That means somehow the title search process isn't flagging the water debt in every case, right? And so it is not so much that we need to file the lien, but we do need to think about how we ensure that the water charges do wind up blocking transactions, right? And so that is something we are working on. We don't have a solution.
I will say, I know when I bought my house, it was checked. Just as a data point of one.
If there's no more questions on receivables or lien sale, we'll move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here we get to the heart of the matter, 8.5% proposed rate increase. So the components here, which we thought was helpful for the board and the general public, is to break down what makes up that, rental, the rate increase. So at the top, you have, the rental payment, and this is the component pieces for 24 and 25. At 3.1%, and that would have been additive since it was not projected as of last year. So this is all a new add on top of what was the previous projections for the rate increase. Next, you have a small component for some DEP O&M needs, mainly related to some stormwater initiatives that were going on as we continue to look at it. As to the commissioner's testimony previously, that we've been expanding out and helping to make more effective stormwater measures. Next, you have the O&M component, 0.8%. Most of that for this go-around is primarily due to collective bargaining. Most of the labor agreements have been settled by the administration through this calendar fiscal year, as well as there was an increase in the fringe benefits and pension costs for the system in the city in general, which also added component piece there, which went from about, I think it was 56% per employee to 58% per employee. So taking that across almost $600 million worth of personal services costs, that adds, significant, $10, $20 million right there. Then we have also debt service related to the ongoing expanded capital program. So that is the continued effort to deliver on the $30 billion of capital, either the work that's happening or the work that's projected going in. So, and to the extent that we need to refer to our rate consultants here as well to answer questions that Marcus from the analog. And finally, you have the continued, reduction that needs to be covered, which is for decline in consumption. We generally see about a 1% decline in actual consumption every year due to efficiencies that as, people replace toilets, they put in new construction, new fixtures, those are much more, lower flow operation. We see it's great, but it also means that, we have pretty much And we talked about this at numerous board meetings about the fixed nature of many of the costs of the system. So just because consumption goes down, it doesn't mean that there's light reduction in costs. We still have the same number of people at the treatment plants. We have the people going in the streets and fixing the water mains and the sewers. And there is some slight, change that we had to do interest earnings as well. Some to the positive, some to the negative. That's been a very, very big factor in what we've been dealing with, on the debt service side, because as you know, interest rates have gone up. The authority as the agent, as the systems, financing arm, has been making the most of that in terms of getting the best interest they can. But savings that we used to get from having much lower interest rates are no longer accruing to the system. So we've had to make sure that those are being fully accounted for in budget as well. I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions. And, I'm here, Ed or Dave Womack from the party side.
I mean, I'm sure we all have lots to say about this, right? But especially the city has, of course, the authority of the release to request this payment. So I wish they wouldn't, maybe prefer them not to, but they can, and so that puts us in a position to think about how to make sure that the system has its funding. But it really, the logic that I think had been presented for the past several years of all the water system funding going to the water system was very compelling, because then you know that all the money that's being asked of residents of New York and users of the system to pay is going to improve the system. And this is breaking that a little bit to fund other things. I think it's funny, if you had come to us, I think, and said, we need to figure out how to spend $300 to $400 million per year on our new Bureau of Coastal Resilience or on PFAS reductions or and then you look at the cost per month, it's like, there's a logic there that I think a lot of people would get and understand, and it would be an easier conversation. This feels like a harder conversation for some reason, because it's breaking a model that has been in place for a couple of years now. So, and then the other thing, the corollary here to you said earlier, there's a $30 billion need for coastal resilience, and we have a current $30 billion for stormwater resilience, which is absolutely necessary and part of our ongoing capital program. The fact that the rental payment and the debt service are almost the same number is really interesting here, and how much we could afford if that rental payment was going to more capital investments to build out more of what the system's doing. So it just sort of like reacting to this in real time a bit around what this all means. And of course, the city has the obligation or the ability to ask us of this. And we have an obligation to fund the system to make sure it can continue to do what it needs to do. I wish this wasn't part of it.
But I think that's the final point, is that the city has the legal right to do it. We therefore have the fiduciary obligation to pay. But it is disappointing that they've elected to do that, given past precedent around that.
And I'm eager to hear what we hear when we go out to different communities and hold hearings about what this is going to be. I think we're going to hear it here for it.
Well, it's a difficult conversation to point out. We have to pay city costs as a movement. We've been dealing with people, though, and we will be dealing with people who will not understand how that can happen. That is, what are we paying for? What is it that we're giving to the city in response to their, not requirement? It's a hard sell. To your point, it's a hard sell, because we're dealing with people who are not doing what they do every day. We're dealing with people who will have to be persuaded in some cases that this is something that has to happen.
It may be worthwhile, and maybe something to think about as you develop the presentations for the rate hearings that come up. If there's a slide about the history of what the rental payment is, because I think most people,
Sure.
I know most people don't understand or appreciate what it is. It's a confusing and complex. So that even if it's ready when we get questions, as I'm sure we will hear a lot. I remember when it was smaller percentage of the rate increase and a smaller payment, we got a lot of fearful from people. So that would be something I think would behoove us to be able to have that.
And if you look back, Omar, to
slide,
But also,
slide nine.
the agency has done a great job on affordability programs in the last several years.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, maybe we get to it later in the presentation, I missed it, but like, how we can think about the affordability components of this as the rate is essentially almost doubling from last year, and what that might be.
So we did have this slide in the deck here.
Yeah, I think a little bit more than that.
Yeah, and so that'd be, you know, I mean, what were you thinking in terms of what more you want to see in that?
I mean, what is the lease, what is the rental paying for, even if it's on the slide, I think the verbal discussion, that, I think.
Right,
Yeah, it's
and-
not just a discretionary item, it's again, the legal agreement, what it takes.
And how long for?
Yeah.
and How far?
Perpetuity.
What does it mean in the future?
Yeah. And the fact that it's now a 5-year plan going out, and you know, this is half the amount this year. It's doubling next year. It continues, and I also think that the appreciation that it's not passed on to the water board, we as an entity with our own budget, therefore discretion can pay for it, that it gets passed on to customers. And we are simply here as a medium to figure out the most efficient and effective way of distributing that amongst our ratepayers in a way to ensure that we and you have the funding to pay for the best water system in the world. Is something that we need to do, but it's not, you know, it is also going into New Yorkers' pockets to pay for this.
I know in the past we displayed a chart that showed us against national costs.
Yes,
and
we have.
that, yeah, that was always.
I don't know if we have it on this one, but
Not
we
on
got
this
that.
one, right, but
Okay.
if,
Yeah.
I think for the public, you might need that because then you can say, well, we're still under the national.
Or at least in
Or
line.
at least
with-
in line,
Yeah.
correct, or at least in line with what's happening in other parts of the country.
And we also have that
By
as
the
a
way,
grant
is
as well.
that's a testament to the work you do, that even with the discretionary rental payment, we are in line with the national, which means without that, we'd be below.
One final thought that would be helpful, I think, for us to understand this is, you know, every year we look at the 1-year rate, but we don't really see what it might mean on the projected out years. Because it also feels like the amount of the percentage of the portion of this year's rate increase that is rental payment feels like it's a lot lower than it's going to be in the future. And it would be helpful to see that projection out into the future of, you know, what does this mean? Or what's at least, what are we projecting this might be in the next 4 to 5 years of rate increases? That chart, I think, that you did have up showed the rental payment going, but we never really get a chance to look at the sensitivity of these different requests and the different needs on the system and what that means in the long term for projected rate increases. That would be helpful to see.
My other one question is connected with us back to the accounts receivable. I know that it's a counting amount, but is there any way to estimate, you know, if everyone paid the bills from last year, or the current fiscal year, you know, is that a material impact, or where is that here? Because I do think that is also an area that, again, if someone chooses not to pay or is unable to pay, that doesn't disappear, it gets passed on to the ratepayers.
Well, look, on that one, and as Joe pointed out, were the city council to authorize lien sale soon, right? And I emphasize soon because, of course, the day the mayor signs the law is not the day money starts flowing in, right? And we will need money to be materially flowing in by, call it February, March, I defer to Ed and Joe here, before we would really factor it into next year's rate proposal. But it is true that we think that could save 1, maybe even 2% off of next year's rate hike if the city council does that. But again, it is hard to predict what it will. This has been a lingering issue for quite a while.
I would love to make a fine point of that at the rate hearing to go out and incorporating that, because I think that is there are many options on the table for ways to mitigate the impact of our cost increases on.
And then it is true, Dan, as you point out, I mean, the math is fairly straightforward, right? The rental payment in FY '25 was roughly 300 million. We have a revenue base of 4 billion. That's 7.5%, right? We are asking for 3.1%. Happily, the system has significant reserves that are higher than we really need, even with all of the protection of the bond and everything else. And so there was, and we had used some of that in the last 2 years to moderate the rate hike, and so we're doing that. But it is true that over time, we're going to have the baseline at full 7.5%, because it's the purpose.
Right, this isn't necessarily a new normal, this is the pathway, this is the curve up to a new normal. And that's, just thinking about this in terms of, grant guidelines for, projected increases, on edge rate case, like, there's a whole bunch of things, and they're all going up at different rates. And, New Yorkers don't necessarily care where those costs are going, but they just know that they're all going up. And it'd be interesting to see where we fit into those curves as well, of rate increases, and, are we above and below those other
Well, so
requests?
yeah, as you know, as basically your successor as chief climate officer, I also oversee the city's filings to the Public Service Commission. And the reality is, even though 8.5% feels like a big rate hike, on the electricity and natural gas side, we've got 15-20% rate hikes that have been approved by the Public Service Commission. So this still is a bargain. Now, of course, as this slide shows, well, first of all, I'm very proud of the fact that we've really focused on managing our costs. So I think that is a big deal, and we take that very seriously, and we will continue to do that even more. But of course, we are not exposed to the fluctuations in fossil fuel prices. That drives a lot of what has happened in electricity and natural gas prices over the last couple of years. So that is a big difference. I will claim it's our genius.
But I would just add to that, there is a large element of our operating costs that relate to the light power and fuel. So as some of those prices go up, and this gets to sort of the convention as what we do for rate setting here is that going into, knowing right now what we know, there are certain projections we've gone through, but there are also some of the uncertainties that we don't know about as we go into next year's rate setting. If we get wind sales to the commissioner's point, that could change, 1-2%, maybe even more after that, since there is such a large accounts receivable balance there. We don't know where inflation is going to be at. Interest rates have been a very difficult situation. We've been managing to stay steady with it thanks to the work of the Board Financing Program. We did one of our largest bond offerings at a very good rate. And I don't know if Dave wants to talk a little about that, but those are the things that we have to factor in and determine when we bring a rate each year to the board itself. So we take all that into consideration. So talking about the out years, there's a degree of certainty and uncertainty that we want to be able to modulate and, not have, and always the objective has been, and we'll get this into a later slide, we can talk about a little more, it's like, we need to make sure we're raising enough revenue for the coming year and as best possible for building the foundation of what your base is to be able to cover all of the expenses for the system, which now will include, having to make sure that we're paying for the rental payment.
Well, and at this point, we're talking about it as if it's a fait accompli, and maybe it is, but there still is a point to be said of, at least speaking on my own behalf, urging our friends at OMB at City Hall to rethink this. And there's going to be a lot of feedback from the public, I think, where they may want to reconsider that.
I gather that those conversations have already taken place. I don't know that that's correct, and I'm not asking because they may be, but my sense is from being in staff that, well, you use the expression, it's fait accompli. It's in my own neighborhood, it's a done deal. They expect the 50% this year, they expect the full rate, and in FY 26, 25. So, yes, please. Maybe we will
Well, I think if you could
This board does not want, I don't want to see this board, one vote of 6, have to raise the rates by 8.5%. Given where we were last year, it's nearly double what we did previously. It's a big number. And we did such a good job for a number of years keeping rates down without endangering the now not aging.
It's still age.
Just let us know.
Can I just, a couple of points of process, actually, one thing I want to just make sure to clarify, Dan, going back a couple of questions. Just to be clear, coastal resilience is not actually a water utility.
No, understood.
Correct.
Yes.
There may be some costs because we have so much coastal infrastructure that is water related, so there are probably going to be some costs within VCR that flow to the water utility side, but the core VCR functionality right now is tax levy and grant funded.
Understood. Well, and almost like, I guess my point being that knowing that it's not part of the water board, if at some point, if there was legislation to make it part of the water board, like we might be looking at a cost that could be at that level of $300 to $400 million a year. And that would be something that I think the board would need to consider deeply, because I think it's an important function.
If we were all that.
Yeah, that's right.
If it were to be recommended.
But I understand.
Right, and stormwater, of course, is, coastal isn't, but then the other thing, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear on the process, the mayor's executive budget is done, it is published, it is proposal to the city council. There is, the DEP has no role in this.
Not a lot of wiggle room here.
So, the only next step is between the mayor and the city council and the city council.
And that segues, thank you, because I'm jumping ahead of slide, but to your point, these are the inputs, in terms of what the revenue needs are and what the uses of those sources of revenue are. No, that's important. So that, to do that in terms of saying, how would you modulate 8.5%, that would mean, particularly looking at 25, saying, where could you come up with even more revenue, such as like from the lien sale, which is, not a reality, at least at this point, that we don't have any authorization, so we can't project that in there. Or where can you go and do some modification of expenses? I mean, I think it's very important to note that the addition of the lien sale has in no way meant a diminishment in anything that we are providing either on the O&M side or on the debt service side. Our capital budget is the same, it went up slightly with this executive budget, and our operating expenses are still the same as well. To the other point that you made about enhancements, yes, there's always the need for, looking at and thinking about enhancements to the system, new programs and everything, and those would have to be considered accordingly as well, which would be, in most cases, additive, other than if we were creating efficiencies within the system, which we're always looking at. We've been doing stuff like that all along. So I think those are the things that we're tasked with as the operators of the system for, the water board and for the city, to make sure we're taking all into consideration as we go through the process of, the budget and the revenue generating that we need to do. I'll pause, questions, and then we'll go back, I guess, because we did skip a few slides here, so. Right, so I think we talked a little, and I think to your point, Evelyn, we do have another slide where it does show all the 30 cities as well, and I think, Ed Marcus and his team are working on that, and we'll put together the rate book, so we'll have that ready for the public hearings as well. So we'll be able to see that to the public board there. But as noted, we are still even, right at this point in looking at 24, and I believe when you do get into 24 with the other cities raising their rates equally or as much as we are, we're still going to be in that below the average of these 30 large cities that we track to in terms of what our rates are there. And I think that goes across the board, not just for our residential, but for our commercial and our industrial uses as well, for where we provide oil and source services. I'll pause, questions or issues on this slide.
You will expand the slide.
Yeah.
So you've got the names of the cities.
Yes.
That's what they're projecting. Good.
What's the next biggest system? And we deliver about 1 billion gallons a day. I'm curious, what's the
Los
There's a lot
Better
of,
be on the way.
Yeah, Los Angeles.
yeah, that would make, and like there's an economy of scale that explains some of this, right?
Economy of scale, in part, the reality is that the efficiencies of an unfiltered system are huge.
Yeah.
We can go back, but this is a lot of what McKinsey looked at.
Yeah,
You know, things for funding last year. You know, we're gravity driven, so we're very energy, not energy intense. We've got our infrastructure. One of the things that, you know, as you well know, we've continued to try to make the case to New York State that they should give us a fairer share of water money. They will frequently cite this against us and say, well, you don't need help because your water rates could be higher. The reality is that compared to the rest of New York State's water systems, we are pretty expensive. We're not the most expensive, but a lot of smaller systems that don't have the built infrastructure, places where tearing up the streets costs less because there's a lot less stuff under there, right? Those systems actually operate more cheaply. So we are not by any stretch the cheapest in New York State. We are in fact more expensive than most water providers in New York State.
How do we compare to the other unfiltered systems?
I would have to go
Small
back.
universe, though.
It is a small universe and getting smaller. You may know Portland made to walk away from their fans.
So we're one of four.
One of which is Sitka, Alaska.
Yeah.
I think we need
Racial
to
one.
No, it is interesting. It's and of course with McKinsey we look very closely. Boston, where their reservoirs are in the middle of the state, in a far less populated area than our reservoirs. So they don't pay anywhere near as much in taxes and FAD payments as we pay. And then San Francisco, their reservoirs in a national park, so you know their watershed protections are federally funded.
And to the average cost that this will have on, you know, the customer, so if we have the average single family, go from $1,088 per year, 70,000 gallons to $1,181. So a monthly increase of $7.71, less than $100. So it's not insignificant, but not unreasonable. And you see the like numbers for the rest of the users there as well. So, any questions? So we talked about this. And, you know, we did, as addressed, we did get some additional needs, you know, with the executive budget. We had some capital infrastructure improvements at Oak Reservoir, which, you know, Rick touched on. We also did get a significant increase for customer billing for water conservation technology. This is with the water meters and the meter transmission units. We're having those aging out, and we've been continuing with the ongoing replacement of the water meters. So this will help as an enhancement. It won't be seen for probably 2 to 3 years, but as we get those new technologies in and new meters in, that usually means you're replacing older meters that may have slowed down and therefore not reporting as efficiently as it would. So this will actually be a revenue enhancement for us to get those in there as well. One of the things also to, and here Albert you speak to, you know, because you don't work very closely on this, is starting to look at meters that can be automatically shut off. So that we may not do that system-wide, but be able to do that in those homes where you have problems with recalcitrant account payers. That way you can be able to just do something electronically and then make sure that they're going to get on a regular basis. So we think that, you know, on top of, you know, being able to put the taps on the curb, which you also have, I think, under, you know, legislation. So we're doing aggressive efforts to try and be more proactive about making sure that we can have those people that are not, those account holders that are not paying, those that need to exercise the enforcement tool without being, you know, too intrusive, or that can be very done cheaply and cost effectively on our side. We also got some work related to Delaware Aqueduct, as you know, Rick mentioned that one. Some additional stormwater pumping for, you know, for pump stations for pure water, wastewater treatment. And in aggregate, these all came to about $680 million. that were additional to the capital plan for the executive budget. And then we do get, as we go back in the graph on for the bar chart for the rate proposal, $11 million for smaller resiliency as well. Next slide. Here, Dave, you want to talk to this slide, please?
Sure. I'm David Bowman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Water Authority. We issue bonds to pay for all the great improvements that DEP has to implement. And what this chart shows, and I'm sure you're all aware, interest rates have gone up in the last few years. And the system has benefited, the authority has benefited tremendously, particularly during those periods, 2019 through 2022, when interest rates were very, very low, particularly our short-term interest rates. We have about $8 billion in variable rate debt that is at the short end of the yield curve. And at the end of every year, we can bring in $100, $200 million in cash. We budgeted a higher rate, excess cash, that allowed rates to stay very, very low. That cushion's no longer there. You know, short-term rates are now 5% range. Our variable rates are 3.5% range. So, and we're budgeting a little above that, but that cushion isn't there. We have been fortunate and very aggressive about refinancing our debt and generating interest rate and debt service savings. We did, as Joe said, the largest transaction that the authority had ever done. We've done 2 refunding transactions this year that will generate $200 million in present value savings. And we continue to look for aggressively to refund and refinance our debt. Now, those savings are generated, will be achieved over time. They're not in the current year. They are reduced interest costs, reduced principal payments in certain years. But we'll keep doing that. But then we also have to add new debt. And the authority's capital program is funded 85 to 90% by debt. You saw an amount for PAYGO capital, $325 million. That's comes out at the bottom. That's cash. That's cash line construction. The rest of it is all borrowing. And so to borrow at the lowest possible costs, we need to maintain high and attractive credit ratings so that our investors will allow us to borrow at a very low cost. So that is the environment we're in. We have demonstrated market access. Our rates are high. They're in the second highest categories for all three major rating agencies, and we want to keep that. And that's what the cash flow does. That's what the cash flow does for us.
I think some of that was on the next slide too. And in conjunction with the in-city rate, we also are bringing to the board a proposal to increase the upstate water rate as well. So this is based on a long-standing practice of how we determine what the rates are for upstate, which is slightly different than in the city. Remember, most of our customers upstate are wholesale users. It's either municipalities or the water systems that are running the systems or the municipalities. And so they will buy the water from us. They will then do treatment or whatever else they need to do before they pass it on to their customers. So ours is, a component piece of what their cost of service delivery is. We go through and look at the various costs because, we don't include any of the in-city rate, in-city charges in the upstate rate. It's all the cost of service delivery north of the city line. And so there are, variations on what we do up there versus what we do in the city. So for this year, we're proposing 1.82%, which is comprised of, as I said, the various component pieces there. It's somewhat lower than last year. We had a higher rate last year than we had in city for the upstate was 6.76. So it sort of equalizes out over time when you look at it from there in terms of how it all goes there, but never 100% just because of the variability of what goes into the upstate programs versus downstate. And this would also that's for the wholesale rate. What we pay or what we charge for those users that go over that, what we call the excess charge, if they use water above what they're allotted, we charge that the in-city rate for that as well, since we're equating it to the same cost of service delivery for what we do in the city. This is pursuant to long-standing practice. They've disputed it on a number of occasions, but we've had it upheld by DEC, so we feel comfortable that this is a fair and reasonable rate for the upstate ratepayers as well. And we'll have a separate hearing, as we always have in the upstate communities, to be able to voice their opinions on it. I don't know if Ed Mark is good, and we're the great consultant who does this work for us as well, so any questions? That's where Ed's more than talk about. Okay, I think.
I have a
So, there's no distribution of sewer in that.
Exactly.
Almost like a barn.
Raw.
So I could speak to the different bill affordability programs that we've been offering. I know that's something that's very important to the board and very important to us. Again, the theme of making sure that we're giving, helping those that really need that help, so that when we're enforcing on those that don't, we have that mandate. So the Federal Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, or LIWAP, came to an end towards the end of last calendar year, early this calendar year, delivered $33 million in relief to our customers. It's a means-tested program. And then we did, and you authorized essentially a top-off program where we did a match and provided another $8 million in relief to those customers. We are part of as an agency, an industry-wide lobbying effort with the federal government to try to resume this program because it was very beneficial, and we'll continue to advocate for that. As Joe alluded to earlier, we also have an affordable multifamily property program where we've delivered $7.5 million in relief. Again, this is working with some of the most vulnerable, challenged properties to come into payment arrangements that are mutually beneficial because we want these important customers to come into good standing. We also have our standard multifamily water assistance program, which we project is going to provide $12 million in support to affordable rental properties. That's something we do towards the end of each fiscal year, which will happen this fiscal year. Same thing with our home water assistance program, which leverages data points participants in the HEAP program that are property owners, and also Department of Finance means-tested programs to ensure that we're providing additional relief to low-income homeowners. And finally, the auto pay or auto pay plus initiative that you authorized last time to get customers enter into sign up for auto pay, monthly billing, and e-billing. They previously received a $100 credit on their bill, now down to $50. We've had 28,000 customers take us up on that offer, which we're very happy with. And again, this is all about get folks into the habit of paying their bill, set it and forget it type of situation. We're very happy with that program, and we'll continue to offer that to customers that want to meet the program criteria and receive a $50 statement credit.
question on the affordability programs. Do we have a sense, or do we have a future meeting, can we look at the take-up rate? How much of these dollars are being utilized, and whether, like, are they being fully utilized? Are they oversubscribed? Are we advertising it well? All those sort of questions about more than just the budget amounts that are in here.
Absolutely. Turn down to more detail.
Of course.
Thank you.
Give a little bit more detail on slide 31. I think Albert covered the headlines here, that the program's being reauthorized, that we go on the same program terms, and with the funding expansion included, the board first approved in FY22. So the large bill credits a larger enrollee basis. But in the interest of anyone, the expedited property managers, the selection criteria is the same as last year, reflecting the modified ranking where we're going to prioritize the most affordable properties first. And we'll probably do the same thing this year. We're right at the margin. If there are ties right at the AMI cut, which will probably be around 40 percentile, 38 percentile. We may be able to go a few additional properties at that tie rate to cut off, consistent with how we did it last year. The other thing to flag is the Relief Forgiveness Program is a program that is, in my view, underutilized. It's just for any property owners and managers. It's a good idea to enroll in electronic e-coolers. It's a good idea to set your MyDEP account. If you see a leak, receive augmented consumption, even if you're not sure what the source is, and you correct the condition, or you ask us to conduct that leak inspection, we can give you a substantial discount on the reduction in usage provided. You can see it on meter consumption after that. That savings would be very, very substantial for small property owners as well as large property owners. So 3,000 counts a year usage, the benefit is small, but it's actually, you could actually do more than this based on demand for the program. This reflects historical usage patterns. It's a very good program. It encourages conservation, encourages real-time monitoring, and we would eagerly give more of the credits to repair leaks that are identified and corrected quickly. This is something we want to draw attention to.
It's another area where like AI-enabled analysis would help be proactive in telling people you have a leak.
Yeah, we do some of that now. You sign up for electronic alerts, and there's usage out of trend for your interpretation. You have an email that you have to have an email on file with us. You have to opt into us. The meter's got to be working, the transmitter's got to be working. A lot of accounts haven't signed up for it. A lot of people act on that. But there's certainly, it's an area where water usage area analytics has a ton of sort of run potential. So that's absolutely natural.
But there's certainly an opportunity to go above and beyond just a Disney on file, thinking forward of where you see large anomalies and there are other proactive ways to reach out.
Absolutely.
This is a terrific program.
How do we let the public know? I mean, is there some educational campaign? I mean, beyond it, because if I don't have an email on file, how do I know this? I mean, and I happened to geek out on this, and I did look at mine, and I thought I had a leak, and it was fascinating. It's great to see, but I'm thinking about other customers that are not going
Evelyn, if I could, I think this is a good conversation, and Dan, your question around uptake, whatever, I think, let's come back to you with that. That is something that Albert, since he took over as acting deputy commissioner, he's got a long list of things I've asked him to look into, but, and he's done a really good job of looking into many of them, but it's a long list. And kind of this problem we have where I think we don't actually exercise the power we could do to force people into things. We should consider making certain things opt out rather than opt in. Like, we're going to explore a bunch of those and come back to you, right? And particularly with the new, not the new, but having extended the service line insurance program. I know, Albert, for the first time now, we have an agreement with a WR where we are going to be working together on marketing through staff at ECS. And I'm really excited about that. So there are a bunch of programs like AutoPay, et cetera, that I think we're going to take a really close look at how we get uptake to be where it ought to be. All right, this one is to me. So as you know, last year at the equivalent meeting to this, I expressed discomfort with the fact that we keep, frankly, kicking your can down the road on MCP. We have, and I had said we would start enforcing this. And we've been doing a lot of work to that end, but in fact came to bit of a conclusion over the last several months that MCP doesn't need to be restarted. It needs to be refunded. This is a program that adds real value to many of its participants, but frankly, it is a program that is probably obsolete the way it is currently crafted, and we need to step back and rethink how it provides value to those who participate, how it provides value to the system and to the broader community of ratepayers and city residents. And so I consider it, frankly, personally, a bit of a loss that I'm going to request that we once again forestall the surcharge for fiscal year 25, not because we are kicking the can down the road, but because we don't want to restart a program that I fully expect, not next year, but over the coming months, to come to you with a proposal for a replacement. I do not think MCP should be should survive this next week as we know it right now. But I will say it creates a lot of value for us and for its participants in many respects. And so we are going to rethink it. We are going to come to a proposal for how we make MCT relevant to
Is this something that McKinsey will offer us?
we have not asked for help from McKinsey. You know, it is possible that there might be external advice we could get. I'm not sure whether McKinsey would be the place I would turn first. But you know, again, this actually was relatively high up on the long list of things I asked Albert to work on. He did a great job, but as often happens when you start to look into something, sometimes it turns out it's more complex. The appropriate solution is more complex than you had thought during that case. So we're gonna look at it, and Mr. Chairman, I think you know, basically I'll take your point to remind us that if we need outside help, we should look for it.
Let's close out. Here's our schedule for the hearings. Attendance is not mandatory. It is always appreciated. We expect with the rental payment that there will be a lot of interest, and we want to be prepared. And I think, you know, and if you have additional comments or, you know, suggestions in terms of how you'd like to see the deck, please, you know, get those to me and Albert, and we'll, you know, take, you know, get reporting. You know, that's our first one will be at the May 28th. And then for on Thursday, June 13th, we will have the final, you know, review and, you know, determination by the board whether it's 8.5.
And the format of these meetings, is there both an in-person and a hybrid component, or is it just in person? How are you conducting these?
I think we're gonna look into that because we usually do it just as in person, and we'll also take like, you know, written questionnaires. We'll have to see whether we can stand that up in each of these locations to be able to have, you know, a hybrid, or perhaps what we could do is designate the one particularly. I'm looking at the, where's the cat? Yeah, so we'll see what we can do about making one of them perhaps a hybrid. So let's talk to,
Hearings in this room.
Yes.
I was thinking about the attendance last year was pretty sparse.
Yeah.
At least the ones I attended. And maybe that's consistent. But that's also might be a function of, you know, the times we pick, where we choose to do it, and if there's other ways to get feedback, whether through hybrid or other things, it would be really helpful.
yeah, and I think, you know, to your point earlier, like I at least been on some or watched like for the guidelines board where they do have, you know, that kind of participation, but it's more, you know, people being able to voice their opinions and stuff. So we'll look into that.
Thank you.
I agree. I think if you could do it all virtual, frankly, I would. I think you get more participation and a lot of hearings. TV, for example, does virtual. We do regulatory hearings. They're all virtual. However, unfortunately, the public meetings law, the way we interpret it, does not allow that.
It doesn't allow all virtual, it allows.
Correct.
the virtual
So we're gonna,
component.
as Joe said, we're taking another look at it also for these meetings. But unfortunately, the law is more restrictive than personal.
Oh, I don't think it's wrong to have an in-person component.
Yeah.
I think it is, for some people, that's what they're gonna wanna do, and they're gonna wanna show up and voice their opinion, so. But I do like having multiple ways that people can.
I think we can see more participation. Because of what it would be.
Comparing the past years where we have had rental payments or other major issues, we will allow this. What's that?
I didn't even.
Oh, but in past years where we have had rental payments or other major issues, we've had 20, 30 people.
Sure.
And in years where there is a delivery increase or no rate increase, we've had 0 people.
That's right.
Not surprising.
So to recap,
Sorry, one other thing that I just wanted to say to you all, so that not a surprise. Unfortunately, I have some travel plans, so I will not be able to make all of these hearings. I will make some of them. So, not skipping out, but maybe something. Good night.
And the plans will be over.
So it's a proposed rate increase of 8.5%, beginning on July 1st, 2024. Also proposed allowance for rate increase of state 1.82%. Public hearings from May 28th to 24th, with the board having a final determination on proposed rate on June 13th. To the board of state. And there is the contact information for either by mail or by email to be able to write to the board for those public that are, will see this. They're in touch with us, their commentary.
Can I ask a timing question? So the mayor's proposed budget was issued, the city council has until June 30th to finalize the budget. If something were to happen, conditionally with the rental payment and negotiations between the mayor and the council, and we've already approved the rate, what would happen? The rate would be in effect.
The rate right now is, we asked the board to approve a rate up to 8.5%. So there is latitude for it to be at a lower rate if it was so determined.
Could the board make a sort of conditional, like if the rental payment is reduced or eliminated, they're like a proportional amount to the rate rather than it just being up to?
If the board approves the budgets and the rates,
That's what goes into effect, right?
we would have to redo the process. And that's provided for in the statute. We can change the rates at any time we want.
Would we be better off waiting until after the budget is set?
Well, the problem with that is that our
rates don't
our
affect
rates
July 1.
don't affect on July 1.
Correct.
We need a couple of weeks for Albert's team to update the system and issue the bills. And by the way, it's particularly important for those customers that are on annual billing.
Yeah, of course.
And as you know, as I was saying, the MCP program provides real value to the system because annual billers are paid early on, so we have cash that's great for our bondholders, et cetera. So I would be very hesitant to change the schedule because that might have knock-on effects.
But we should be aware that if there was a change between mayor and the council on this final budget adopted, that we might go through this process again.
Potentially, or we could just make use of latitude next year in the future. I mean, there are a number of things. But Al, could you just clarify? So is what Joe said accurate, that up to would leave the agency any discretion, or no? It's 8.5, and that's set.
That's a question I've never, that's a question of first impression for me.
But I believe that, you know, but I think that to what you said earlier, where the board is adopting the budget, which the rate needs to be able to support. So they go hand in hand from there. So we would have to reforecast the whole budget and then be able to reforecast the rate.
So let's
You have to do
ask
this
the
process.
question. The question is, suppose the board favored an 8% and not an 8.5%. When do you have to know that? So that you can do whatever the forecasting is you have to do, so that we can actually vote seriously on an 8% budget.
I'll take the first shot at that. There's some to the bond doc, to the authority's bond documents.
Yes.
We have to have what we call a debt service coverage ratio.
Okay,
Okay?
I understand what that is.
And that is 150% of debt service projected for the year, plus the administrative expenses, all the other expenses. Okay? It would have to conform to that. I don't know,
So we're being asked.
the is the 8.5 more than covering our debt service coverage this year? So there's a, okay, so
There's some
you might have room to do that.
But I would temper that, because again, it gets back to the budget that we're gonna be presenting that's a 45 Act, so there would have to be some commensurate reduction. To your point, Dan, if it was something that was revised with the rental payment, that's easy. They would just say, all right, we're taking out some portion. I do not, and in any way, foresee that the mayor and the council will be reversing that, but I do not speak for the mayor.
Or just hypotheticals, but.
But yes, then it would be fairly, straightforward. Anything else would mean it would have to come out of one of those other uses of funds, which means that we would be cutting either the capital program or cutting the operations.
Because the two go hand in hand, you need to, you can't just say, Brad, we're gonna do a 5% rate increase with the budget that requires it.
Yeah. The board's required to raise enough revenue to support the system. That's its ultimate goal.
It would just be interesting, like, whether there was the ability to do conditional. Well, if the rental payment's in effect, here's the rate, if it's not in effect, here's the rate. Or, but I hear your point.
It sounds
Mr.
like-
about, right, you would deal with it next year, you would get a credit next year.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, board.
Yeah. But the timing of this is interesting and mentally awkward. Yeah, okay. It puts the board on the spot before the numbers are fully set. It has every year, but maybe like this year it's raising a question.
It's raising the question in a different way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would just say though, I don't think there was any, even back in the days when the rental payment was taken as a matter of course, and some years, in the Bloomberg administration, rate hikes were going on it. Very political. I believe that we have no precedent for the city council actually between an exec and adopting the changing it. So that would be a truly unprecedented.
Well, this is New York City, strange things.
Fair enough. And as written, Val said too, to your point, Dan, you would, and there again, we always have little ins and outs that happen at the end of every year, even after the board is active. And those always accrue or work against, next year. So that's where, like I said, next year's projection based on other factors that will be coming in. So those would all be accounted for in that. Mr. Chair, turn it back to you.
Are there more questions?
Exhausted.
For a moment.
Reserve the right to have more questions.
I like, David, I like the footnote in one of your charts that said rating agencies are cautious. And therefore, there being no further business to come before this board that I'm aware of, are there any other businesses? There being no further business issues, I move to adjourn.
So good.
I'll use it. I've never done it.
I'll second
Okay. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Anybody abstain? We're out of here.
Very good.